Hi all, welcome to the second video in the series looking at population geography, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the factors that influence population change. Now to start us off, we've got a series of indicators that most of these you've probably heard of in one way or another before. We're going to run through them and establish what they mean, as these are the indicators that we use most commonly to help tell us how a population is changing. So first we've got birth rate. Now with birth rate we tend to use the crude birth rate. Now what we mean by that is the number of births per 1,000 randomly selected women in a population of childbearing age over the course of one calendar year. So you pick, say 1,000 women who are capable of bearing children, and over the course of a year, how many children do they have? And that gives you your crude birth rate. Crude death rate is a similar idea in that you look at how many people per 1,000 that you randomly select die over the course of the year. We then look into life expectancy, and this is if you take all of your death rate statistics and you look at when people are dying, you average out how old people are when they die. Now, obviously, with life expectancy and with some of these other statistics that we'll go on to talk about, we are talking about averages. So, you do have people who, in terms of life expectancy, will live longer or shorter than the life expectancy would have us believe is what should be expected. Infant mortality rate is the number of children per 1,000 live births who die before the age of 1. So you take a random 1,000 of the live births that you have in a country, and over the first year of those children's lives, you look at how many of them have died before they make it to 1 year old, and that forms your infant mortality rate. Now, natural increase or natural decrease kind of crudely gets looked at as the difference between birth rate and death rate. Is your population going up or down depending on how many people are being born or are dying? Now, for natural increase and decrease, we don't consider migration a factor. So we just look at people that are being born and people who are dying. And if you've got more people being born than you have dying, you've got a natural increase. If more people are dying than are being born, you've got a natural decrease. Now the last one we've got here is fertility rate. Now fertility rate and birth rate seem like they should be kind of the same thing, and they are very similar. We're still looking at how many of a set of women give birth. However, with fertility rate, we define it a little bit more particularly. In fertility rate, you'll tend to find as fertility rate per, and then it'll be something like women between the ages of 18 to 24. Women between, 35 plus. Women who have a university education, women who have no education, women who live in a rural area as opposed to an urban one. So we'll use another factor with fertility rate to help determine what particular subset of the population we want to look at and how many children that subset is having over the course of a calendar year. Now, with fertility in particular, there are a lot of factors that can influence whether or not fertility rates are going to rise or are going to fall in a country at any given time. And we'll run through some of these here. So in terms of the rising side of it, if you've got a country where having children is an economic benefit, now by and large we're talking about developing countries in this context, you're going to have a situation where large majority of the population work in agriculture. And it is, if you've got a large proportion of your population working in agriculture, we can safely assume that the agriculture isn't particularly technology dependent. It's more human manpower dependent. So if you have children, they can go out and they can do tasks on the farm. Now, we're not talking about having 3-year-olds going out and, pushing a plough, but we are talking, young children possibly helping to tend to chickens or helping to pick fruits and things like that. You've also got a situation where you might well look at children as being an insurance policy. If you live in a country where you don't have a social care system for the elderly, you'll look at, right, if I have lots of children, some of them will still be about when I grow old, so they'll be able to care for me when I need them at the end of my life. There are some nations in the world where having lots of children is seen as a status symbol. Particularly if you look at some areas in Latin America, for instance, particularly for males, being the father to lots of children is seen as a symbol of virility and it's seen to give you an enhanced status. In terms of different heritage reasons, you might have reasons historically why you want to have lots of children. It can be as simple as continuing the family name. So you want to make sure you have lots of children, particularly lots of sons. Also, you might have areas where particular religious beliefs will lead you to having lots of children. So, for instance, areas that are very strict adherents to Catholicism. Catholicism says that you shouldn't use contraception. So if you've got an area where you've got a lot of very, very strict adherence to that religion, you'll find the birth rate will rise because they're not using contraception as fully as they might be otherwise. And that's the case for a lot of different religions. If you've got an area where women are of particularly low status, so they are not being educated particularly well, they're not getting particularly good careers, they're not entering the workforce until they're very later in their lives. The crass way of putting this is that they are seen as your stereotypical a woman's place is to be a mother and in the kitchen. If you have a country like that, and they do still exist around the globe, birth rate goes up because women will spend more of their lives acting as mothers and homemakers, and as such will have more time to raise and care for children, and then tend to have more children. It's important remembering at this kind of point when I'm talking about things like this, a woman's reproductive lifespan is the limiting factor in fertility. Once males go through puberty, they can reproduce until they die. With females, obviously, once they start to menstruate, they have until they go through the menopause, and that fertility window, that reproductive lifespan, is what a woman has to have children. So if you have women who, leading into the next point, marry early, then it's likely that they will start to have children younger in their lives, so mathematically, they just can have more children. I mean, if you don't have your first child until you're well into your 30s, then mathematically you cannot have as many children as somebody who started when they were 13. It just doesn't work that way. So if we've got early marriage and linking into women being of low status, you will find that your fertility rates will increase. Now also, if we've got an area where we've got a lot of poverty, you will find that we have got a higher fertility rate as well, and this marries up into a few different factors. Areas where you've got high poverty, you will tend to have, and this links into the next factor on the list, you'll tend to have poorer education, which tends to mean people are less aware of birth control, less aware of family planning, all of these types of things. And equally, if you live in poverty, going back to some of the earlier things that we've mentioned, children can be an economic benefit. Children form your safety net for when you're old to take care of you. All of these things mean that you may well be in a position where, due to being extremely poor, having more children is beneficial to help keep your family running. Lack of birth control, kind of talked about, if you don't have either access to it, as in it might well be too expensive or just not available for different reasons, such as religion, then obviously you can't use it. Or if in terms of education, you don't know how to use it effectively, that will lead to a rising fertility rate. The point I always make here is that, any of you guys should know, one, what effective birth control is, two, where to get it, and three, the fact that you can obtain it for free. Now, if you put all of those things together, it means that you are in a position where you are less likely at a young age to wind up having children out of ignorance. And that doesn't even start to go into the then you know that it's available side of things as well. Now, the last point we've got here, if you've got a high infant mortality rate, then you will tend to find that the fertility rate increases to try to offset that infant mortality rate. The very crude mathematical way to look at this is if you want to have 5 children, but you know that 1 in every 2 will die, you will have 10 on the assumption that you will then wind up with 5. But the way that fertility rate is calculated is it's not on the lifespan of the child, it's on the fact that the child was born. So by that infant mortality rate being high and you having more children to try and offset it, it means that you'll have a higher fertility rate. Now, if we quickly look down the following list, I'm not going to go through these in as much detail because I'm hoping, as you'll see, they are basically just the flip side of the stuff that I've already mentioned. One of the ones that maybe does bear
Commenting the economic drain one, when you move into developed nations particularly, children become an economic drain rather than a benefit. You can't send children out to work when they're very young in most developed nations. You know, there are laws against it. And because of that, you find that to have children, prospective parents need to have a thought of, can we afford to care for a child if we have one? Women of higher status, later marriage, having access to birth control, a lower infant mortality rate. All of these things are just the flip side of what I've mentioned earlier. Having educated women marries into the later marriage, women of higher status side of things. If women are given education, they will tend to have their first and then subsequent children later in life, because frankly they are focusing on things like getting an education, getting into a career, and moving and benefiting their own kind of career goals before they start to look at having children. And that's very much the case in the developed world, where you will see, on average, that women who have high-profile careers tend to have fewer children. You know, obviously, with all things, there are exceptions to this, but that's the way the averages tend to play out. Also, if you've got access to good healthcare, you can find that fertility rate will fall, because, again, that marries back into that infant mortality. You don't need to look at children who are going to potentially die. Because the children won't die, you don't have to have more to offset that. And equally, when you go on later in life, it means you don't need to bank on your children taking care of you if there's a healthcare service that would do it for you. Now, I've got government policy in here under falling. Government policy really should actually be in both, because the government can influence a huge number of the factors that come before this, and as such, they can influence whether fertility rates will rise or they'll fall. If you want to influence and have a falling fertility rate, you do things like you make sure that you've got lots of sexual education provision in schools, that contraception is free and readily available in lots of different areas. You might give tax breaks to families who have fewer children. At the very extreme end, you've got China and the one-child policy that a lot of us have looked at before, but we'll certainly go on to look at a little bit further in future as well. On the other side, you'll remember the Do It for Denmark adverts that I've shown you before. If you can't remember them, give them a quick search and refresh your memory. But it is this idea of a government programme that is giving out, in the Do It for Denmark case, it was sponsoring a travel company to give out cut-priced holidays for couples to go away, and if they proved they conceived on holiday, they entered a lottery to get lots of free baby, nappies and baby clothes and all that kind of stuff. So that was the government taking a firm hand in trying to promote a rising fertility rate, and equally they could do that by the reverse of the stuff you would have for a falling fertility rate. Restrict access to contraceptions, restrict sexual education provision in schools, etc., etc. Now, I'm going to wrap this one up here, guys. This one's went a little bit longer than I initially intended. Apologies for the kind of stuttery bit in the middle, as I'm sure you all heard the tannoy going off and I had to pause the video. Next one, we're going to start to look at how we gather demographic data, how we gather population data, and I will see you guys then.